it back after, don't use a red marker, it screams at them, but something of blue or green. Just say, hey, did you know you missed this? You've got too small of a disconnect here. You've got the wrong size breaker. You're putting certain equipment here that doesn't work well together. Let's talk about this. Why did you make this mistake? And it's a slow learning process. A lot of the corrections that are given by HJs are simply because something electrically doesn't work because it hasn't been proofreaded. You grab a template of a template, you drop it in, maybe you add energy storage to a solar system you've built in the past. You realize it had gone through a revision and the breaker sizes don't work and stuff like that. So the biggest advice I can give to prevent any kind of delays, because delays are always massive when it comes to the building department, is know your audience and then know what your plans actually say as far as proofreading there. And then lastly, when the inspector comes out, you as a contractor or you as a project manager, whoever you might be looking over a project, does the plans reflect what's there on the wall? And then is the inspector coming out, go look at the plans, look at the wall and see everything's harmonious with each other? Does everything match? If everything matches, it's unlikely that he's going to have an issue with that because the plans were kind of already approved. So that in itself saves a ton of time. And then the last piece of the puzzle is just make sure you get your stuff in early. You never know when a delay is going to happen. So if your project's moving forward in 3 weeks, doesn't matter if your HJ is over the counter, make sure you're getting that in early just so you can have it. And then if the off chance that a project falls out or something gets pushed back, you've got another one to drop in its place so you can keep things moving for your crews.
Thanks, Brandon. All right, last question for the panel, and then we will move to Q&A. I'm seeing some good questions come through, so please keep them coming and we'll get through as many as we can. So this question goes to you, Brandon, first. How can installers ensure that permitting issues do not result in a negative customer experience? What tricks do you have up your sleeve?
Yeah, this is with any business, transparency. If you look at bad reviews online, especially for solar companies, because there's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there. It's just unfortunate. Every industry has them, but solar for some reason seems to be the loudest with them. You look at the bad reviews and they usually boil down to communication of what was promised and what was delivered. So whether, hey, I was expecting X size system, I got a Y size system. I was expecting it to be completed in X amount of time and it's Y amount of time. Communication is key. You can make mistakes. A customer will usually forgive you in making mistakes on, hey, I know I told you it was this amount of time. It's going to take a little longer. That's a lot easier to forgive than I told you X and I keep kicking the can down the road and I stop returning your calls. So make sure you have that communication up front with your client. Additionally, there should be someone that the client can contact that's not just the main office. So whether it's the contractor that goes out to the job site, obviously if you're a larger company, you can't do that. But project manager or someone that's assigned to that project, the salesperson, whoever you have that's going to walk them through the process, let them know what to expect, and then let them know that you're available for when they have questions or concerns. And that makes everyone feel better. If I'm having a re-roof for my house and the contractor doesn't show up and the project manager doesn't show up, and I just have guys on my roof, I'm very nervous about the whole process because I don't know how long it's going to be done. I might have a conversation with one. I don't know if he's speaking for the company itself or if he's just giving his opinion. Have someone that's a one person that the client can reach out to and know that they're going to get an answer what they're looking for.
Thanks, Brandon. It just takes a couple seconds to come off mute. Same question to you, Crescent.
Thanks, Ben, for the question. So it's very, very similar to what Brandon said. I mean, if you want to have your customer to be happy, you want to keep them in the loop because they don't want to be left out in the cold wondering what's going on. But in order to give them actionable information, you need to know what's going on with every project yourself. So having that internal system to effectively manage your permits will give you actionable information to tell your customer. Oh, well, your permit, we're still waiting on it. That's not really going to make your customer feel better, right? So having, accurate information, babysitting those permits to understand where they are in the process, to be able to explain that to the customer is very important. With that same vein, I think it's also important to streamline that customer communication. You don't necessarily want your customer receiving updates from a permitting person and receiving updates from a utility person and receiving updates. So streamlining that communication, and having that single point of contact, but making sure that single point of contact has access to that project information. But also helping customers understand that receiving the permit is not the full process. Closing the permit and making sure that we prepare the customer for an effective inspection process is also important. So similarly with, babysitting the permit, it's very important to capture any changes that may have happened in between permitting and installation. If something changed on site, making sure you have a structure in place with your organization to get that re-permitted if necessary, so that when the inspector shows up, again, you want everything to match. You want the homeowner available so that the inspector doesn't have to come back. So just making sure that the communication is clear but actionable, so that the customer knows exactly where they stand and how they can contribute to keeping the project moving forward.
Thanks, Crescent. Ray?
Sweet. Yeah, I think they hit it. It's about expectations, and I think even with giving proper expectations, and I know there's a pressure. Every customer wants the thing installed, within 2 weeks or something like that, and to promise that, knowing that there's many process steps in that timeline that you're not in control of, I think is a challenge. But maybe even maybe more of a nuance there is making sure that you have accurate kind of tracking on where you're waiting on an external party. Meaning, if your permit is submitted, that's great. Now the pressure is on the city, the county, or the utility, and I think making sure that you're on top of where you're the wait time, when you're the contractor or the designer or the permit coordinator, someone you're waiting on internal process versus external, and sharing that with the customer. I think some of the best experience that I've seen, granted, caveat, some of the worst too, is when a customer is pushing on the HJ and asking, hey, I'm a taxpayer in your city, county, et cetera. I'm trying to get my permit and it seems like it's being delayed. That can be really helpful, right? Because of that local thing. At the end of the day, I think that there's a huge difference and in experience if you know that jurisdiction than if you don't. If you're just someone random, hey, you have an office in LA, but you're pulling a permit in Temecula or something, it's just like, who are these people? But getting your customer involved and having that transparency and knowing whether it's sitting at the HJ, sitting with the utility, so that they're associating the delay, not where it is appropriate, right? If it's waiting on you, customers are going to come after you. But being able to disseminate between those two things and providing that transparency is super helpful. We've seen a lot of companies that have kind of pizza tracker transparency for their customers to provide an understanding of where it is along the way. And a misstep in that a lot is bundling up all your approvals into one big step. So when the design is completed or the permit package is kind of ready, starting that clock there versus when it's submitted, right? And being a little bit more granular so it's very clear your permit is sitting with the city of Los Angeles versus your permit has been submitted. It's a little more nebulous, but it makes sure that accountability is where it's needed to protect you, protect your business, protect your people from those negative associations and negative reviews that come from a negative experience for that homeowner not understanding enough about the process from the get-go and associating that delay with you and not the city, the county, or the utility.
Great. Thanks, Ray. We are going to shift gears to questions from you all. So please put them in the chat. There's a number of questions in the chat already, or please put them in the Q&A, excuse me. There are a number of questions on Solar App, which we will start with. There are a few questions that should have short answers, and I'll take those. And then for the question about Solar App that has a long answer, I'll kick to Crescent. So there's one question from Jasmine Sincular. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. She says, Solar App is an excellent tool for residential. Is there an analogous tool being developed for small scale commercial? So the plan is for Solar App to expand to commercial in the not super distant future. There are a couple the algorithms to verify that those projects are up to code need to be developed, and then it needs to be coded in. So there are a couple technical things to figure out, such as how do you verify code compliance for flat roofs, but coming in the hopefully not too distant future. Orlin Whitney asked, oh, sorry, wrong question. Jesse Hoff asked, is there a time limit for jurisdictions to implement the new automation standards? So what Jesse is referring to is California. Governor Newsom signed 2 months ago SB 379 that requires jurisdictions adopt Solar App or software that is equivalent. Jurisdictions with more than 50,000 people have until September 2023 to comply. Jurisdictions with between 5,000 and 50,000 people have until September 2024 to comply. And then I think that also answers Shannon Moore's question. Any idea when Solar App will be available in San Diego, California? So the answer is they must comply by September 2023. Crescent, the longer question for you comes from Marcus Van Gils, and I'm happy to weigh in as well. But Marcus's question is, how can individuals and companies in the solar industry help increase adoption of Solar App? What ways are there to be involved, and who at NREL can we contact to have those discussions?
Those are exactly the questions that we love to hear. So, you know, really right now, I think it is about educating and informing the jurisdictions that the software platform is available. It is growing in adoption, but it is still, you know, heavily concentrated in California, and it has had more uptake in jurisdictions who are already a little bit farther along in kind of the thought of automation. So the first thing that I think is useful to do is visit the Solar App website. There are a lot of resources, videos, brochures available that you can provide to the jurisdictions that you work with. Either when you submit your permit, you can have a conversation with someone at the front and ask, you know, who within the organization is a good person to talk to, and then put them in contact with NREL. So NREL, Jeff Cook is the program manager. So he is coordinating, you know, the effort of Solar App, but there is additionally an outreach team who does a structured outreach effort to reach out to jurisdictions, provide demonstrations, and help feed the pipeline from interest to full onboarding. And so they can take that referral that you provide, and they can take it from there to invite that jurisdiction to have a more engaged conversation. We are seeing that there are things that need to be in place for Solar App adoption. For example, the software platform that a jurisdiction is using has to be compatible, and there are updates that need to happen on the software end. So there is a timeline that's necessary for adoption and implementation. But that would be how you could help be involved. I hope that answered your question. And then, of course, Ben, if you'd like to provide Jeff's contact information, or if there's a good contact at NREL specifically for the outreach, I'll defer to you for that.
Yeah, I will drop the email in the chat. Let me just pull it up. I believe it's team@solarapp.org is kind of the clearinghouse address, but we can put that in the chat momentarily. Thank you, Crescent, for that answer. Next question comes from Dan Sharoni. Brandon or Ray, one of you can speak up if you want to answer it. Do you have an opinion if a visual inspection by flying camera, drone or UAV can help improve the user experience by expediting, reducing the risk of falling off the roof for the inspector and overall streaming the process? So that was Dan's question, and then I'll tack the question onto that if you folks have opinions of virtual inspections as well, where the inspector is comfy in their office and the installer is at the job site with a smartphone.
Yeah, I'll tackle the drone one because this is one of the programs that I took on at Tesla, was introducing drones for site surveying for some of the same reasons of removing the fall risk of getting on top of a roof. And we had toyed around with the ability to do inspections, really from photo capture, right, to be able to have that two-way dynamic interaction with the HJ to see certain things without having to set up a ladder. I know that there are a lot of ambitious building inspectors that are out there that have no problems with getting up on a roof, but it just felt like there was probably a better way to do that. And so I think the benefits are there. It's how do we get a program that allows for a city or a jurisdiction to adopt something like that in a meaningful way. Then we had tested around with virtual inspections as well, with the FaceTiming, et cetera. A little joke here about, our favorite is always the drive-by inspection, right? Where you just showed up, you're sitting camped out, and you get a notice that your system's been improved. That's always the best one. But in lieu of that, FaceTime or some kind of video sharing or photo capturing, we've seen actually success most recently with being able to supply, hey, I need to see these things from the site, and being successful with interacting with various inspectors on that side. So I think there's still some work to do in terms of getting kind of a platform solution for being able to do that a building official or a building department can adopt. But I definitely see value to being able to do that, and already are seeing some departments adopt those, especially where remote COVID, et cetera, has had this shift in terms of work capacity and keeping folks kind of out of the field in some instances. So, yeah.
Hey, Ben, can I add to Ray's answer?
Please.
Yeah. So real quick, I actually brought this topic up to the code breakfast for the International Association of Electrical Inspectors Southwest and Northwest chapter meeting. So it's once a year. It's about 2 years ago. A lot of the older inspectors don't like remote inspections, especially utilizing the drones. And the big fear is when you're out on site, you can look around. Now, you want to keep your blinders on, right? And just for the most part, most inspectors just want to see the solar system, the energy storage system, and that's it. I don't care about the other unpermitted structures around me, although some building departments really push for that. But they want to be able to walk the system and look at everything in its entirety. If I'm using a camera and I'm walking with my phone to do it in a remote situation, I can choose as the installer what not to show you. I might not be able to show you the electrical behind me, so I'll make it very easy to maneuver my camera so it avoids that. Inspectors don't like that. That being said, a lot of the newer inspectors love it because it allows them to get a lot more inspections done without having to drive place to place. And they know when someone's kind of trying to pull it over them. They know which contractors are good to work with, which ones they can kind of trust on this stuff, and what specifically they're looking for in the system. A drone helps that even more because you can see the wide shots, right? COVID did a great number on this as a kind of a silver lining of what it did for our industry. But a lot of departments are low in staff and still have a lot of these inspections to complete. And it gives them the ability to not deal with people one-on-one and actually do it at a distance with the remote situation. A lot of them have used it during the COVID situation and have liked the results and are choosing to continue to use it. And it's also being discussed in their groups to continue using it in other departments. So I see we'll do a lot more of this in our industry in the upcoming 2 to 3 years.
Thanks, Brandon. Next question comes from Lucas Richards, who asked a couple questions. I'll ask both of them, and President Ray, Brandon, whoever wants to speak up, please do so. In the areas where feeder capacity is maxed out, what is the best way to help her encourage the utility to move forward in upgrading these systems to allow homeowners and businesses to even have the option to install solar? Lucas is speaking specifically about New Mexico, but I know this is an issue across the country. And then Lucas also asked, in New Mexico, utility permit approval takes 2+ months. What is the best path to help them streamline this process? What resources would you suggest we provide them with? So this panel, we've talked a lot about getting a permit from the HJ, from the building department. We haven't touched really at all the whole interconnection issue. So if we could address this probably as the last question, that would be appreciated. Who would like to take it?
Ben, I'll take it. Can I get some clarification? Maybe they can enter it in the chat. Are they looking at service as in they want, if it's a small service, there are ways to not upgrade the service and interconnect. Either if you want to do like a line side tap situation, depending on if the HJ allows it, the code allows it. But, or if you don't want to go line side tap route, you can keep your first disconnecting means, run conductors to a new panel board, increase the panel board capacity, and then attach a pretty large energy storage or solar system to it. If the goal is simply to get the service itself upgraded and the utilities pushing those prices or that cost onto the customer, that's kind of the norm, unfortunately. There's no incentive for a utility to invest in infrastructure if it's going to allow the customer that they're building that infrastructure for to then get a bigger solar system and then not pay them as much as they're used to. So unfortunately, depending on your state, there's not a lot of recourse on that. But you can get as long as you stay within the code and the guidelines set by your HJ, look at the local codes and standards. There are creative ways to meet the intent of what you're trying to do. And that could be as simple as, like I suggested, you turn your service panel, that now becomes a pass-through. You mount a sub panel next to it, which now becomes your service panel essentially. And then you just feed that panel board with your breaker from your original service panel, and your original service panel, that's where you do your interconnection. So you're protected by overheating the bus, so to speak.
Thanks, Brandon. I also wanted to add, in California, the utilities, we had to, at least the investor-owned utilities, we had to pull them screaming a little bit, but they've put out capacity maps to show what areas of the grid can take how much additional capacity. And those are not necessarily useful in making the case to them to increase the available capacity, but it allows you to know where the problems are going to be before they exist, and maybe choose a system size that's slower or target a different area. So those maps have been incredibly helpful as well. Jesse asked about September 2023 and September 2024, those time limits for solar app implementation. Can we post the link? And we did that. I posted the link I posted the link to the bill in the chat. And then we also dropped in the email address for this solar app. That's the email address to use if you have a jurisdiction that is interested in adopting solar app. That's who they should reach out to. If you have questions about solar app, that's where to go. And then of course the website, which I dropped into the chat, also has a ton of resources as well. We are going to wrap things up. Crescent, Ray, Brandon, any quick final thoughts before we close out?
I just want to say I'm excited that everyone's here. I'm excited that our industry is booming. And I think it's important that sessions like this and conversations like this continue to happen, because we've got to keep our customers happy. At the end of the day, we got to keep our customers happy. So I think with that in mind as the guide for everything we do, our industry will continue to grow and we can continue to make an impact on the world. So thanks for attending the session.
Sure, I'll say something. The one, there's a running saying where if you're going to be a parent, the type of individual that buys a parenting book, even if they don't read it, is the kind of parent that's going to be a good parent. And it really is true with any kind of industry. The ones that show up today and these types of events and deal with a lot of the organizations for further learning and such, you're not the ones we have to worry about in the industry. So the fact that you show up and you're willing to learn on this stuff already shows you're above, the cut of the rest. I recommend that you reach out to your local International Association of Electrical Inspectors. See if you can attend some of their meetings. I don't think it costs me. I think it's like $100 a year to join. Even if you're not an electrical inspector, you at least see what your local areas are discussing as far as new code changes and such. You also get to learn who's actually present on those meetings, which AHJs, what inspectors, which chief inspectors and building officials, etc. I would also recommend a copy, or the digital version now of the International Association of Electrical Inspector magazine, and look for organizations like CALSA putting out guidebooks, SEAC, IREC, and REL, SIA. The list goes on and on. Everyone's in codes and standards is trying to find solutions for everyone along the pipeline. So thank you for showing up today.
Last thing I'll say, echo what Crescent and Brandon were saying. And I think the more folks that we have in the industry, the better off we're going to be, right? And the more that those folks who are industry branch out in different places within that that network of folks, I think the more helpful it's going to be. I think I've seen awesome progress happen when folks come from the industry side and go into the municipal, go into those township side, because they bring that education, they bring that knowledge, they bring that expertise to that building department in a way that probably won't happen organically. And so always excited to kind of see that crossover. And I think it starts with just more people being interested in it, period. So thankful to Aurora for setting these things up, getting the word out there, and thankful to Aurora and Ben for hosting us.
Great. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Crescent and Brandon and Aurora as well. Last, I wanted to end on an important note, which is we have spent a good deal of basically all of this panel talking about, on a technical level, what can we do to make the permitting process easier or make the experience better for the customer. But if we wanted to take a step back and try to change the system in which permitting is difficult, the best thing that everyone could do, and I encourage everyone to join and give generously to your state solar industry association. In California, several years ago, we passed legislation to streamline permitting. This year, we stepped it up by requiring automated permitting, but that's California. Colorado Solar and Storage Association, Connecticut Solar and Storage Association, others, they are working on streamlining permitting too, and have had really great success. And the only way they can do that work is by having a strong membership. So please look into joining your association wherever you are. A final reminder that the recording of this session and NABCEC credit information will be emailed next week. Please also consider a donation to the solar project Aurora is helping Edward Norton's team build, benefiting wildlife in Kenya. Aurora is matching donations up to $25,000, and the link will be in the chat if it's not already. And that concludes our panel. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Okay.